Everything you thought you knew about the discovery of America might be wrong. Did Columbus truly discover America, or were there others, Vikings, African explorers, Chinese fleets, who set foot on this land long before 1492? Well, from lost civilizations to forgotten kings, from ancient trade routes to hidden explorers, this is the story they never told you. Get ready to uncover the greatest historical mystery of all time, because history is about to be rewritten. Before we dive deeper into history's secrets, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. If you love mind-blowing facts and untold stories, you're in the right place. Don't miss out on what's coming next. Join the adventure. Together, let's unlock the past. History tells us that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. But what if I told you that's not the full story? That the footprints of others had already marked these lands centuries before him. The Vikings, lost explorers, even a mysterious Welsh prince, and long before them, the true first inhabitants of the Americas. This is the untold story of who really discovered America, and the forgotten king who may have ruled before any European ever arrived. 500 years before Columbus, a fearless Norse explorer named Leif Erikson and his crew set sail across the Atlantic. Their journey led them to an unknown land, a place of rolling forests, wild rivers, and fertile ground. The Vikings called it Vinland. Today we know it as Newfoundland, Canada. But the settlement was short-lived. The Vikings were not alone. The land belonged to others, an ancient people who had called this place home for thousands of years. Long before any Viking or European set foot in America, the land thrived with millions of indigenous people. The Maya, Inca, Cherokee, Algonquin, Apache, and countless other tribes built cities larger than some in medieval Europe. They weren't just wandering tribes. They built empires, developed written languages, and practiced advanced agriculture and medicine. To say America was discovered is to ignore those who had always been here. But there's another mystery hidden in history, one that few have dared to ask. Did America ever have a king? Legend speaks of Prince Madoc of Wales, a nobleman who, in the 1100s, fled his war-torn homeland in search of a new world. Some believe he landed on American shores and established a settlement. Could it be true? When the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they met powerful indigenous rulers, men like Montezuma, Powhatan, and Sitting Bull. To the Europeans, these leaders were kings, even though their societies didn't follow the European monarchy system. We were taught that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But the truth is far more complicated. Columbus wasn't the first to reach America. He wasn't even the first European. But he was the first to change history forever. With Columbus came colonization, disease, and destruction. Within decades, entire civilizations were wiped out. The Americas were never the same. So who really discovered America? Was it the Vikings stepping foot on Vinland, the lost Prince Madoc, or were the indigenous peoples the true first discoverers, having lived here for thousands of years before anyone else? For centuries, we've been told the same story. Christopher Columbus, the brave explorer, discovered America in 1492. But what if I told you that story isn't the whole truth? That others had already reached these lands. Long before his arrival, Vikings, African sailors, even mysterious lost explorers. This is the real story of America's discovery, a story of myths, controversy, and forgotten explorers who might have changed history. Christopher Columbus wasn't just an adventurer, he was a man on a mission fueled by ambition, gold, and the promise of power. He believed that by sailing west, he could reach Asia, but what he found was something far greater. Columbus stepped onto what we now know as the Bahamas, but he didn't discover an empty world. He arrived in a land already thriving with life, culture, and people. The Taino, the Arawak, the Maya, civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Columbus was hailed as a hero in Europe, but for the indigenous people, his arrival marked the beginning of the end. Disease, slavery, and violence spread across the New World, wiping out entire cultures in just a few generations. So why do we still celebrate Columbus Day? Why is he a hero to some and a villain to others? The answer lies in history's greatest contradictions. Was the Viking Trail, Leif Erikson's journey? 500 years before Columbus, the Vikings arrived. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, led an expedition to a place they called Vinland. They built settlements, explored deep into the forests, and even clashed with indigenous tribes. But their presence faded, lost to time. Tooth, the Chinese theory? Did Zheng reach America? But what if I told you the Chinese may have reached America decades before Columbus? Admiral Zheng He, China's greatest explorer, commanded a fleet of massive ships. Some historians believe he may have sailed across the Pacific and reached the west coast of America. African explorers. The Mali Empire's secret voyage. The Mali Empire of West Africa was one of the richest civilizations in history. But one of its greatest mysteries is the story of Abu Bakr II, a ruler who supposedly built a fleet of 2,000 ships and sailed west, never to return. Did he reach the Americas long before Columbus? The Knights Templar, a hidden escape to the New World. And then there's the legend of the Knights Templar. Some believe that after the Templars were hunted down in Europe in 1307, they escaped across the Atlantic. Did they reach the New World? Some strange carvings and ruins in North America suggest maybe. So who really discovered America? Was it Columbus, who changed history forever? The Vikings, who walked these lands long before him? The Chinese, the Africans, or even the Templars? Or were the true first discoverers the indigenous people who had already built vast civilizations here for thousands of years? We all know the story of European settlers in America, the Spanish, the English, and the French. But what if I told you that the first Europeans to set foot on this land came centuries before Columbus? That mighty kings ruled parts of the New World long before European monarchs claimed it as their own. This is the forgotten history of the first European settlements in America and the kings who ruled these lands. 500 years before Columbus, the Vikings arrived, led by Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red. These fearless Norse explorers sailed west from Greenland and discovered a land rich with forests, rivers, and untamed beauty. They called it Vinland, modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. They built settlements, hunted, and explored deep into the wilderness. But they were not alone. Indigenous tribes, possibly the Beothuk, watched from the shadows, uncertain of the newcomers. Conflict erupted, and the Viking dream of Vinland came to a brutal end. The Viking settlements faded into legend. But when Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, the European conquest truly began. The Spanish crown, eager for gold, land, and power, sent explorers and conquerors, men like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, who would forever change the fate of the New World. With fire, sword, and deception, the Spanish established colonies across the Caribbean, Mexico, and South America. They built grand cities, introduced European laws, and crushed ancient empires. By the 1600s, the Americas were no longer a mysterious land. European powers fought over its riches, carving up entire continents like pieces of a chessboard. The Spanish ruled vast territories from California to Argentina. The French claimed Canada. The English built colonies along the east coast. But who truly ruled the New World? Though the Spanish crown controlled vast lands across the Atlantic, the true rulers of the New World were not just European monarchs, but also the powerful indigenous emperors who stood against them. First, Montezuma, the last Aztec emperor Montezuma II, the ruler of the mighty Aztec Empire, was one of the most powerful men in the world. His empire stretched across Mexico, with its capital Tenochtitlan, rivaling any European city. But his fate was sealed when Hernán Cortés arrived in 1519. Betrayed, captured, and ultimately killed, Montezuma's death marked the fall of the Aztec Empire, as Spain took control of Mexico, to Atahualpa, the last Inca emperor. Meanwhile, in South America, the Inca Empire ruled over vast lands, stretching from Ecuador to Chile. Their leader, Atahualpa, was powerful, but unaware that Spanish invaders were coming for him. Atahualpa made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the Spanish. In 1532, Pizarro lured him into a trap, captured him, and despite being paid a ransom of gold and silver, executed him anyway. With his death, the mighty Inca civilization collapsed. They're the indigenous kings of North America, but not all rulers in the Americas wore crowns of gold. Across North America, powerful leaders like Powhatan, Sitting Bull, and Tecumseh fought to protect their lands from European expansion. For centuries, indigenous leaders resisted colonization, refusing to let their people be erased. Their legacy lives on, not as kings, but as guardians of their nations. So, who truly ruled the Americas? Was it the European monarchs commanding from afar, the conquistadors enforcing their will on the land, or the indigenous rulers who had governed these lands for millennia? History is more than just kings and crowns. It's a battle of cultures, empires, and survival. For centuries, we've been told a simple story. Columbus discovered America. But what if I told you that history is far more complicated? That dozens of explorers, Vikings, indigenous navigators, African sailors, and even Chinese voyagers may have reached these lands long before 1492. This is the true legacy of America's first explorers, and the shocking impact they had on the world we live in today. Long before Europeans, the first true explorers of America were the indigenous peoples who journeyed across land, sea and mountains to settle the continent. Thousands of years ago, these early pioneers crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia into North America. Over generations, they spread across the entire continent, building civilizations, trading networks, and rich cultures. They were not just settlers, they were explorers. They mapped landscapes, created vast trade networks, and established cities long before any European arrived. But they weren't the only ones. Nearly 500 years before Columbus, a Viking explorer named Leif Erikson set sail from Greenland, following the tales of a strange, fertile land to the west. He called it Vinland, what we now know as Newfoundland, Canada. For a brief time, the Vikings established a settlement, but their presence sparked conflict with the indigenous tribes, whom they called Skraelings. Unable to maintain their colony, the Vikings abandoned Vinland, leaving behind only traces of their existence. But what if I told you the Vikings were not the only ones? There are theories, some backed by compelling evidence, that suggest the Chinese, the Polynesians, and even African sailors might have reached the Americas centuries before Columbus. The Chinese connection. Some historians believe that the Chinese under Admiral Zheng He may have traveled across the Pacific and reached the Americas decades before Columbus. Mysterious artifacts, ancient maps, and legends hint at a forgotten voyage. But was it real? 2. The Polynesian navigators. Polynesians, known for their incredible seafaring skills, sailed vast distances across the Pacific. Could they have reached South America, introducing sweet potatoes, an American crop, long before Columbus's? 3. The African expeditions. Even African explorers, possibly from the Mali Empire, are believed by some to have set foot in the New World. Theories suggest that Mansa Abubakari II, a Malian ruler, launched a voyage across the Atlantic, but was never seen again. Could he have reached America first? And then came the man who changed it all. Christopher Columbus. He wasn't the first, but he was the one who made sure the world never forgot. Unlike the Vikings, Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of something different, the permanent European colonization of the Americas. And with it came conquest, trade, and a devastating impact on the indigenous peoples who had lived here for thousands of years. So, after all these stories, who really discovered America? Was it the first indigenous explorers who crossed the land bridge? The Vikings who sailed to Vinland? The mysterious travelers from China, Africa, or Polynesia? Or was it Columbus who made the discovery known to Europe and changed the course of history forever? The truth is, America was never truly lost, because it was never empty to begin with. The legacy of these explorers lives on in our geography, trade, and cultures today. Their journey shaped the world as we know it. If you found this lost history fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.